Great. So I am Jill Walsh. I'm the Assistant Director at Positive Childhood Alliance Georgia, formerly Prevent Child Abuse Georgia. And with me co-presenting is our Executive Director, Jennifer Stein. We're bringing healthy outcomes from positive experiences, also known as HOPE. A lot of our work historically has really focused on the negative issues, child abuse and neglect, and kind of the risk factors, and even ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. But we're learning that there's new science to really focus on positive things and they have greater impacts. So Jennifer is going to start and I'll hop in later.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you everyone for being here today, spending maybe your lunch break with us. Want to start off with just a disclaimer. Many of the people on this call, we come to this work, we have lived experience, and sometimes related to that is also vicarious trauma. We're going to be talking a lot about resilience today, which will also bring into conversations trauma. This may bring up some very real stuff in our bodies. Check in with yourself throughout this training this morning. Is it difficult to focus? Is your heart racing? Maybe your palms are sweating. Are you breathing quickly? It is okay to be in touch with your body. Feel free and comfortable to sign off if you need to, walk away for a few minutes to reset. As you know, we are recording today's segment for that way you can go back to it. But the slides will be available after. Your mental health is more important than anything that we might be covering here today. So I do want to start off with that sentiment. But let's get going and just would love to hear in the chat, or if you want to just raise your hand and give a number, but how much do you know about adverse childhood experiences? Looking at the names of our friends in the chat, I know we've got some experts here, but just give like between a 1 to a 5, 5 meaning that you know a lot about adverse childhood experiences, 1, maybe you're still more novice, a baby. But today we're going to share, a little review of adverse childhood experiences, and then we're going to introduce some and largely focus on positive childhood experiences. And so to kick us off, we're going to be watching this video. There were 2 foundational studies conducted on adverse childhood experiences. One by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and then the other by Kaiser Permanente. And this was done between 1995 and 1997, where they were looking at the impact of childhood trauma on the patient's ability to quit smoking and to lose weight, respectively. And so we're going to watch this 2-minute video that explains and gives a great overview of ACE's study and the significance of the findings on the impact of these experiences on our behaviors and ultimately our health as adults. So we'll cue that start of the video.
Yeah, and it looks like most people have a good knowledge, so this will just be a quick overview. Jennifer, if you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear it. Okay. Oh, it looks like it's not gonna apply for us.
The joys of embedding a video into
No.
a PowerPoint.
I think it's going to ask me to restart my computer. I'm not going to do that because we have most of the people in this room are pretty knowledgeable and we're going to cover them really briefly in the next slide. Anyways, I'll put the link to this video in the chat in just a second.
Sounds good. Love that recovery. Here we go, guys. So, as with all of you being experts in the room, we know that ACEs are common. And the ACE study asked participants about their experiences with childhood maltreatment, like abuse and neglect, household stress, current health status, and behaviors. And they found a direct link between childhood trauma and the adult onset of chronic disease, incarceration, and of course, employment challenges. And they saw that the higher number of ACEs that there would be the greater occurrence of these other negative outcomes. And the ACE study asked
We all like to
participants
think of
about
childhood as this time.
experiences with 10 sorry, it's the little, I'm like, hey, I know that voice. The A study asked participants about their experiences with the 10 specific types of childhood adversity. And you can see on the slide occurring within their household. But we know that children have other experiences of adversity, my goodness. What adversities do children experience that might not be listed here? Would love for you to put them in the chat because we now know that the ACE study has since been replicated and expanded. So some of us, we also know the pair of ACEs with the tree and the roots. So please put in the chat. What are some of these things outside of the 10 adversities that you're seeing on the chart? Sometimes it's related. We had one in 2020, the pandemic. Sometimes it might be around community violence, being removed from parents. Thank you, Zoe. Yes. What are some others outside of the 10 that you see here? Neighborhood gun violence. Yes. I'm going to let you all continue to put Caroline. Yes. Racism, drug abuse, bullying. Yes. Thank you all. Continue to add those because all of those do affect our health as adults. And thank you, Jill, for advancing the slide. Let's go and look specifically at Georgia. The first Georgia ACE study was collected in 2016 and then again in 2018 and 2020 from the Behavioral Risk Factors Data System. Sometimes you might hear it referred as BRFSIS. So I want you to remember this name because it's going to come up again. But the Georgia survey found that 3 and 5 or 60% of Georgians reported adverse childhood experiences. This means only 40% of those surveyed had no adverse childhood experiences growing up. The most common ACEs in Georgia are divorce or separation of a parent, emotional abuse, and substance abuse in the home. So I love to see that in the chat, how you all pulled in some of the most significant things we're seeing right here in Georgia. One of the things too that we've wanted to emphasize is the 3 key findings identified by the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. One, as we've already said, ACEs are common. But what's really important here is that this study countered the narrative that the only people who had experienced trauma were people such as combat veterans, victims of intimate partner violence or sexual assault. And so that was the common belief in the 1990s when the study was conducted. Now we know, and especially those of you with us today, us as practitioners, we understand how prevalent by experiencing adverse childhood experiences that too is trauma. We also know through this study that ACEs negatively affect our health and our well-being, and that it literally can change our lifespan. And so this study was really groundbreaking because it proved that our experiences truly do shape us, and not just our thought patterns or mental health, but they actually affect our biology and do have a lifelong impact. Go ahead and admit some more people. The ACEs study certainly has its limitations because the study only looked at negative childhood experiences. And we know that ACEs are not the only important childhood experiences that impacts our lifetime health. Adversity is only one aspect of a child's experience. And so we'll talk about a typical 14-year-old girl when we think of common things that our children and youth might experience. So imagine this 14-year-old girl who witnessed conflict and verbal abuse pretty often in her home. Now her parents are divorced. And so as we think of the ACE survey, you might expect that there's a certain set of things about this child. Perhaps we can assume that her behavior might be poor, that perhaps she has poor grades, maybe she's a little bit socially isolated. And so you're going to assume that she has this poor emotional regulation, maybe limited impulse control, all because we see her as having an A score of a 4. But what if we also learned that she lives near her grandma, and her grandma is active in her life? Her grandma picks her up. She goes to church with her grandma on Sunday. Because of this relationship with her grandma, she is in the church choir. She sings. And you also learn that she loves school. She has a great peer system at school that also likes school. And that her friend group is really also involved in different extracurricular school activities. The point is, we need to learn more about all of our life experience, all of this young lady's life experiences. Positive experiences are essential and help buffer the bad things that may be happening in our lives. And new research is showing us that positive childhood experiences outweigh adverse childhood experiences in health and well-being outcomes. And so that's what we're going to focus on today, the healthy outcomes from positive experiences, for which the acronym is fittingly HOPE. And that hope shifts the narrative and allows people to be seen for their strengths and not just the challenges that they face or that perhaps they faced in the past. And so let's look at this picture. Some of you may have seen this before. You might have been in this training before, but let's look at this picture and tell us, what are your first impressions? Feel free to put something in the chat. Feel free to come off mute and tell us what you're seeing. We just kind of would love to hear what you see on the screen here. What are your first impressions? Family time. Thank you, Angelina. Overstimulation. Yes, I would be overstimulated if that was my household with all the stuff all over. I got news for you. I'm in a empty nest household, and my husband and I just created our very first chore chart for just the two of us because I can't take it anymore. So I understand. Distraction, chaos. Okay, unsafe. I'm seeing Wendy. Wendy's pulling a strength here. Wendy has says that there's food being provided. Angelina's was a strength, family time. Oh, there is a religious influence. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, Jesus is there on the wall. Gabby says that we've got some bad habits. We can see that there. The family is together. Chaos. All things parent present, and there is electricity. Baby safety. We've got some chemicals happening over in the corner. We've got a cupboard open with chemicals. The mom has been reading a book, so we've got a literacy influence. Jennifer's seeing that there are toys, food, clothing, electricity, playpen, all positive things. And Allison, I love how besides the book, you also included the cleaning supplies. At least there are cleaning supplies, right? That they do value that. So though it might be clutter, it might be chaos, perhaps it's pretty clean. And Leslie, a balance of negatives and positives may present a lot of real life for people. Kat, I love it. Places to rest. Gosh, you all are an active group. I love everything that you're sharing with us. Looks like the child has been reading as well, and a happy dog. I can see too that the young child has glasses, so the child's receiving necessary medical care. So let's talk about this in the chat. We have a great influx of both positives and negatives. I will say that you are all well-trained practitioners, so it makes my heart sing to know that you really leaned into the strengths right away. But I want to also just point out that seeing risks is not wrong. We all have a natural bias to see threats to safety, right? It's our goal to have that child grow up in a healthy, safe, nurturing home. However, When we view families solely through the lens of their risks, we may miss their strengths. And their strengths are what they use to navigate those everyday life challenges. So often we are better able to change behavior by building on existing strengths and creating positive childhood experiences rather than honing in and only addressing those risk factors. So change is also easier when we are not judging families and families don't feel judged or shamed by us. And so let's go just a little bit more into this type 1 thinking. And so this is talking about why was it easier for many of us to see risk factors first, right? Our brains default to the negative. It is called type 1 thinking. And type 1 thinking is fast, intuitive, and it's completely unconscious. And it's based on our training and our life experiences that we've had up to this point. Great example of this is I work in Atlanta, but I live outside of the perimeter. So when I'm driving home, I use GPS because you just never know what's going to happen between here and there, but I typically take the same route. And by taking that same route, my brain goes into autopilot. I am not paying attention to road signs. Half the times I'll get to one intersection and I'll be thinking to myself, how did I get here? I don't even remember passing the grocery store that I wanted to stop at on the way home. That's type 1 thinking. But if all of a sudden on my GPS, it tells me I can save 10 minutes, which I'm all about, and I say yes, it's going to now take me down different roads that I haven't been before. And I'm going to see a road signs. I'm going to slow down. My brain's going to slow down and I'm going to start paying attention. Okay, it's the third light that I need to turn right at. What's the name of that road? I might even take in the fact like, wow, they just put in a new racetrack. I'm going to be able to get gas there. So I'm taking this detour and all of a sudden my brain goes into type 2 thinking. Type 2 thinking is slow, it's calculating, it is conscious thought, involving new concepts and ways of thinking. Your brain is trying to figure out a new route and it's going to slow down to solve this new problem that's been presented to me. Type 1 thinking is also laden with implicit bias. It's our gut reaction, right? It's based on our lived experiences. And so, which also grows from the cultural and personal biases that our brains have processed over time. And we all have them. Slowing down our thought process and using type 2 thinking can help us notice and navigate our biases. Also, slowing down allows us to consciously focus on the strengths and individual characteristics instead of a snap decision on risk and challenges. Many systems, even some of our screening tools, focus on the negative. And this can reinforce people's natural inclination to see risk factors first. So, with practice, however, we can find and ask about protective factors, and the assets can also become natural and automatic. And so this hope, right? Healthy outcomes from positive experiences, all those things that you extracted from that images that are positive things happening in that family's lives, even amongst the chaos, right? Is so that people can be defined by their strength, and we can help them navigate those challenges by drawing from those strengths that they do have innately. So we learned earlier about adverse childhood experiences and the potential impact they have on our health. But now we're going to flip that narrative, and instead we're going to focus, instead of focusing on risk factors in order to prevent trauma and poor health, we're going to concentrate on protective factors and positive experiences to help build strong children and families. The new science shows that early positive experiences promote children's health and well-being. They allow children to form relationships and connections. They cultivate positive self-image and self-worth. They provide a sense of belonging and they build skills that promote resilience. All the things that we want for the families and children that we serve. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jill, and she's going to go ahead and continue presenting on this.
So Jen just kind of introduced us a little bit to the hope and looking at positive childhood experiences. And so just as ACEs was based on a study that looked at risks and adverse childhood experiences, this new research on positive childhood experiences is set about by certain scales. There's a couple different scales that they use. We're going to look at the one that scientists from the Hope National Resource Center had used when looking at this. So they put out their briefs, which we talked about earlier. And so in addition to asking about ACEs, they also asked about 7 different positive childhood experiences to over 6,000 adults in Wisconsin. So the positive childhood experiences, which are the things that you can see up on the screen, this survey had all these questions, and you can see they're not really about like fancy vacations or going to Disney World or playing that travel ball. These are some other things that are brought about by connections, environments, all these other things. So feeling able to talk to your family about feelings, feel your family stood by you during a difficult time, enjoying participating in community traditions, feeling a sense of belonging in high school, feeling supported by friends, having at least 2 non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in you, and feeling safe and protected by an adult in your home. So these were the questions that they asked to do some of their initial studies on positive childhood experiences. In Georgia, we have started to ask some of these PCEs, positive childhood experiences, in our briefs for a couple years now. I think for 3 different sessions, we've asked about ACEs, and so we've been collecting a lot of data about that. But in 2023 was the first time we asked about positive childhood experiences. We only asked 3 questions just because it's hard to get stuff in the survey, and the results are about to be put out. We're working with the DPH data team to get those initial results, and hopefully we'll have those out soon that we'll put in our newsletters and blogs and share with you. But there's been so much research that we can look at already. And as we discussed earlier on, you guys put a lot of things in the chat box. ACEs are more than those 11 indicators that they ask in the survey. And it's the same with positive childhood experiences. It's way more than those 7 things that they listed in that survey. And I also want to point out that a lot of positive childhood experiences don't just occur in our home or interpersonally. There's a lot of positive community experiences that also play an impactful role in the life of a child. So I have a couple more things that just could be considered up on the screen. Just feeling accepted for who you are, spending time outdoors regularly, having something that they're good at or makes them feel proud, and even kind of civic engagement. And a lot of these things are things that you guys also posted in the beginning of our presentation that you had experienced this week. But before we go deeper, we have a lot more kind of new science to share. But I want to start just by asking you all about some positive experiences in your childhood that have influenced you. So if anyone feels comfortable sharing a significant positive experience that they had as a child, and that can be in the chat if you want to put something in the chat, or feel free to come off mute. Just something, a significant positive experience that you had as a child. And it can even be one that you have given a child as an adult now.
I'll share one. Mine was teachers. Growing up, I lived in a divorced family. My parents divorced, back in the early 70s. I had a father that was in prison. There was a lot of things going on, but I had teachers who really told me that it didn't matter, that I could be whatever I wanted to be, and made me feel like I was really a special person. And that was a big impact for me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Wendy. And as soon as you said teacher, we had someone else that had just put in the chat box too. So teachers serve as a huge kind of mentor relationship for kids, especially whatever is going on, to be that consistent person. Um, I also have lived in a beach town about 3 blocks from the beach. So the summers were great, lots of family, all that positivity. My relationship with my grandparents in their home that provided peace and stability and that grounded me as a child. I see another person saying teachers, canoeing and spending time with the river waterfall that we lived with their family, being able to listen and be understanding with my own children. And he tells me how he appreciates it when others don't. So being that for others in the next generation, seeing my dad brought lunch to me and drove me between campuses my freshman year of high school. The freshmen were in an academy down the road. So just that extra time in the car, that's always really concentrated time with a caregiver or someone else. And my grandmother was positive too. She was a great cook and she always got to lick the spoon when she baked, right? Those extra special things just that we get from grandparents or other kin um, or people that are close to us. Thank you all so much for sharing those positive experiences in your childhood and how, they really shaped us or even mitigated the different adversities that we might have had going on. So it seems like most of us can attest to these impacts that positive childhood experiences are. So it's not like rocket science to know these things, but we need to be better pairing them when just looking at the risk factors or kind of even in place of them at sometimes. So now getting back into a little bit of the research side of it. So on this chart, these are the results from examining those positive childhood experiences, and they are astonishing. So we found that positive childhood experiences, they protect future adult mental health in a dose-dependent way. And that means that the more positive childhood experiences you have, the more likely you're reporting good mental health as an adult. So here in the group of people who had 0 to 2 positive childhood experiences, so kind of low on the PCEs, only 51% reported that they had good mental health as adults. And now we're going to compare that to people who had high PCEs, so 6 to 7 PCEs. 87% of this group reported having good mental health as an adult. And good mental health was defined as not reporting depression or poor mental health in this scenario. So now we're going to look at what does this look like for people who've experienced a lot of ACEs. So this graph is looking at the same thing, but just in people who have experienced 4 or more ACEs. So here we can see the protective factor that positive childhood experiences have, even with people who have a lot of adversity going on in childhood. So the people with low positive childhood experiences reported good mental health, and the people with higher PCEs reported 79% of them had good mental health. So PCEs are certainly a protective factor, even in the face of adversity. And so PCEs are not only associated with good mental health, but overall health and well-being across the lifespan. So we see the benefits of PCEs even starting in youth. And I even have a study within 5th graders that I'm going to talk about. So one of the first bigger studies was a longitudinal study. So that's over many, many years. They look and examine and ask people questions. So this was about 5,000 children that they followed from birth all the way through adolescence. And they found that more PCEs were correlated, as we talked about, with improved mental health, but also better academic skills in adolescence. And so some of these studies really sparked a lot more going on. And I have a lot of studies that I'm going to briefly touch on from 2003 and later. So in 2003, there's a PCE study that found an increase in PCEs was an increase in child flourishing. And child flourishing was defined as showing an interest and curiosity in learning new things, working to finish tasks that they started, and staying calm and control in the face of a challenge. And so that's really important, all that social emotional development for kids. And that study was done with over 40,000 kids. A 2025 study found that more PCEs were associated with better cognition in early adolescence. And that study was of almost 6,000. Yeah, 2023. Thank you. And in 2024, a study found that more PCEs reduced the odds of anxiety, depression, aggression, and attention problems in preteens that were experiencing discrimination. So we know there's lots of people experiencing discrimination, and PCEs can even serve as a protective factor in those scenarios as well. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this one is looking specifically at PCE's ability to reduce the odds of behavioral problems in youth. And again, these are all very new studies. So in 2023, a study found that youth with more PCEs had lower odds of perpetrating bullying or being bullied. So we know bullying is a big issue. So lower odds of both being a bully or being a victim of bullying. And that was a study of almost 44,000 children that showed that. A 2023 study found that youth with more PCs had lower odds of recidivism after childhood criminal offenses. So they were less likely to come back into the juvenile justice system or have an offense. A 2025 study showed that the odds of delinquency in high school was 14% lower for every 1 point increase in PCEs. So that's a dose response as well. And then a 2025 study showed that fifth graders with more PCEs had fewer internalizing, externalizing, and social problems in school. And so all of these things, you can see how they lead into those positive things in adulthood and reduce other risks. So we see it both mental health, physical health, but also in just social, emotional, and connectivity for the future. Looking specifically at adults, there's been a lot of studies there as well. PCs are shown to be associated with higher household incomes, academic success, having a college degree, and being employed. Adults reporting more PCEs also reported better physical health, better mental health, excuse me, and having more PCEs has specifically been linked to lower rates of heart disease and depression, as lowering the odds of using cigarettes, alcohol, or other illicit drugs. So all of these things that impact our well-being. So kind of one of the bottom line of a lot of those studies coming together is that research is indicating the absence of positive childhood experiences can be more damaging to long-term health than the presence of ACEs. And I'm going to read that one more time. The absence of positive childhood experiences can be more damaging to long-term health than the presence of ACEs. So for so long, we've been really focused on reducing ACEs, and we still want to do that work, right? We don't want children to experience adversity if they don't have to. But we really need to be focusing on is positive childhood experiences as well, in addition to it, and even more so because we know those mitigate traumas that sometimes we can't avoid or always protect children from, but that everyone can benefit from these positive childhood experiences no matter what they've experienced. Yeah, and we can share those studies. I have all the citations at the end, and we will put the slides on our website afterwards. And so what does that mean that PCEs may be more have more impact on our future health? It's really good news because, as I said, we can't always prevent early adversity, but by focusing on these PCEs and protective factors, we can have a bigger impact on healthy outcomes of children. And so to do this, Dr. Segi and Dr. Charlene Harper Brown put together a framework that we call the Hope Building Blocks. And these are things that through many papers and looking at positive childhood experiences, these are categories that we can work to build on families and individuals to increase positive childhood experiences. These building blocks, they describe the key types and sources of those PCEs that are critical for development. And we know that ACEs can disrupt some of these pathways to positive childhood experiences. So example, child abuse can disrupt two building blocks, relationships and safe environments. So sometimes it's not just building them, but it's removing barriers for people to access them or have some of these building blocks here. And when we see children more holistically, we can begin to see how the adverse childhood experiences might be preventing them from gaining the positive ones in certain areas. So working to increase those, not just in themselves, but removing barriers as well. So we're going to be looking at these 4 building blocks individually and discuss a little bit what that might look like concretely as providers or people interacting with families and children on a regular basis. And we're going to ask for you guys all to share throughout this some examples that your organization or you might be doing to build some of these blocks and work in these domains. We're going to start with relationships. So that early attachment between babies and their caregivers, just foundationally, that provides really the blueprint for all future relationships that the child has with others. And kids grow up, their peer relationships become more important, followed by romantic relationships. And each of those relationships matter. So being in nurturing, supportive relationships are critical for children to develop that healthy resilience into adulthood. And individuals who have recalled these types of relationships in childhood, they have lower rates of depression and poor mental health as adults. So what kind of relationships are we talking about? I said a little bit, but those foundational relationships with the parent or caregiver who responds to child's needs and offers warmth, responsive reactions. Um, the fact that you can spoil a child is a myth, kind of being responsive there, but it doesn't mean that we don't set boundaries. We also need to be setting boundaries as an act of love and to keep children safe. And when kids feel safe, they're more likely to discover and explore in their environment, and that's really good for their cognition. So that feeling of safe and nurturing is really good for learning. Adults outside the family who take a genuine interest in a child and support their growth and development is really important. And many of you mentioned teachers as a big part, as a positive childhood experience in your early life, and having healthy and close positive relationships with peers. We saw many of the questions on PCs talked about, I feel belonging at school. I have peer connections, friends that I can go to and discuss feelings with. So all of those things. And it takes a village to raise children and just to have support as caregivers. And the larger the village, the more opportunities a child has for connection and support. So it's also essential for caregivers to have positive relationships and social connections with other adults. There's been several studies that show that parents with social supports are more likely to have positive perceptions and responses to their children. So when parents' needs are met, and feel socially connected, they're also able to better connect with their own children. Um, and also parents that report more social connections, they report better parental satisfaction and having lower levels of anger, anxiety, and depression. And furthermore, children learn through observation. So it's important to demonstrate and model those healthy relationships. So just as communication and empathy are a learned skill, so are violence and aggression are learned skills. So what are we demonstrating for the children in our lives? And so when we think about how can we build this building block, we can start just with asking some basic questions of our programs and the families in it to get to know them a little bit better. So asking, what do you like to do at home with your family? Or who is someone outside of your family that really cares about you? We can encourage people to find different groups. And I think in our society today that is becoming more disconnected, it's even more important to find those communities and pockets of support, whether it be faith-based, whether it be a book club, whether it be a bowling league, people that you can relate to and have a shared interest or shared activity in that you can come together and have that with. We also, in organizations, want to create policies that give children and families an opportunity to build relationships with each other and in the community. Usually the parents that you serve can act as a community for each other. I know at PCA Georgia, we talk a lot about community cafes. Some of you might even implement some of those. For an example as well, the Babies Can't Wait intake screening talks a lot about, do you have someone you can call if you're not only concretely in need, but socially in need? Do you have a support system in place? So some of the screeners that practitioners are using include a lot of these things that talk about relationships and the importance of them. Does anyone have an example from your organization or your work of what you do to help support relationships and social connections of your parents that you serve, or the family and youth and children? And if you want to come off mute or put it in the chat box, what are some things that your organizations do to help socially connect caregivers and kids? I'll give you a minute. I know it takes a minute to get in the chat. I'll give one more example to give you guys a minute. When I had my first child, I had a midwife coming to my house. And what she did was connect us to other young caregivers or mothers in the area that were experiencing something differently. So I had a baby abroad, so she connected me with another expat from the US and helped set us up a time, because I'm not someone who's super social or outgoing. So it was really nice to have someone make that connection and kind of set up that relationship so we could have someone there that could relate and share experiences. And that was very helpful. I'm seeing in the chat, we do family team meetings, and have the parents and children like CASA, DFACS case managers, and bio parents as possible. So family team meetings, bringing everyone there. And this will put clergy, being connected through clergy, faith-based communities. Another put, we serve as Cobb County chapter of the Basics program. Lots of playground paloozas with children and their parents and caregivers. We love the basics and what they're about. So I love that you're kind of combining that with the playground palooza. That's awesome. Seeing group activities for populations we serve. So grandparents raising grandchildren, group activities. Yeah, bringing people together that can relate. They have that shared experiences that they're going through. So allowing them to connect and engage in that way. Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing those. So the second building block is environment. Children need safe, stable, and equitable places to live, learn, and play. There's a lot in that sentence, but when we're talking about all these things that we want to see within communities, so those communities likely will have a playground that people can access, kids who are exposed to nature. We've talked a lot about that. Kids who attend school in positive environments that they feel like they belong. They have that teacher that they connect with a lot. They have peers they can connect to. They're not all usually direct interventions that someone can implement, but sometimes they're rather spaces that we can create for children, youth, and even families. So one of the questions in the Wisconsin survey, and one that we've asked in Georgia is, did you feel a sense of belonging at your high school? And the sense of belonging is really a reflection of that positive school environment that can be created. And sometimes it is the programs within there as well. So this building block also captures the critical importance of those basic needs like food, shelter, heat, emotional safety. Um, so there's some things that I haven't mentioned yet that could also fall under environment. If you have any other ideas of what could fall under environment, please put it in the chat. But when we're thinking of environments, we also need to be thinking of political determinants of health and the systems that we live in and are also subjected to. And many families live in an environment that they don't have as much control over or things that they're subjected to. So policies that create barriers or act as supports for families to access need or well-being, we can also put under environments. And so kind of gauge where families are at or how we could help build environment. These are some questions that we could be asking to families. So asking them to describe their safe place or what a place they love to go and play looks like. What is that place for them? And try and incorporate some of those factors into your own environment and workplaces. We also want to be reflecting the visuals around them and the materials that we disseminate to be reflective of them, that they can see themselves in it. And that's part of a sense of belonging that we're creating. If they're inclusive of all genders, races, abilities in there, and what public or community resources are available in your community, such as libraries, food pantries, playgrounds, or even low-cost clinics, and considering what, some of those gaps might be in your community and how we can better access those. Would creating an anti-racist environment be applicable to this bucket? I would say absolutely yes. When people are not feeling discrimination, when they're feeling that sense of belonging, and that's a lot of things. I think many of the buckets could kind of fall under that, but especially environment in different ways can fall under that one as well. So thank you for putting that one out. Can any of you share with us what your organization might be doing in terms of environment and creating a safe environment for the families that you work with? And so Zoe already kind of put one, kind of creating anti-racist environments could fall under this bucket. Sharing Find Help Georgia or other resource hubs where people can look and share resources and being that go-to. What are some other things that you all are doing in terms of environment? Making sure that children and families have equitable access to technology. Yeah, and I think that's a great point because that could act as a big barrier for people to access things. So providing that accessibility. Great. Feel free to keep putting things on. Oh. We have hosted Coming Together for Racial Understanding dialogue circles. We have invested in local public spaces to install story trails. I love that. And if you can put what you mean by story trail, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. allowing them to make decisions that relates to their environment and services children receiving. Yeah, so having parent and caregiver voice in the decisions, not only how things look, but in how the practices and the policies go, is a great way to build trust and belonging in that environment. Having Spanish and English translations for all paperwork, amazing. Family resource centers as a model creates that type of environment. Absolutely. Great. And so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next building block, which is engagement. And Jennifer is going to take it from here.
Thank you, Jill. I love watching everything happening in the chat. What I love about the 4 building blocks is just the creativity. There really is many ways, not a wrong answer. So here we are, engagement as our 3rd building block. Dr. Charlene Harper Brown, many of us know her and love her. She is one of Dr. Segi's colleagues, and she says we all need to develop a sense of mattering so that we matter to other people and to our communities. And so for children, that begins when they are given responsibilities within a family by doing chores, or at school when teachers assign classroom tasks. Perhaps they're on a team and they have a certain responsibility on a team, at church, all of these different places, this engagement, the social and civic engagement. Now for teenagers, that can mean volunteering in meaningful and tangible ways in their communities. And that sense of engagement, that civic responsibility, that what they're doing matters, is key to developing resilience. And this could also be looked at as that sense of purpose. So let's look at some things that they're talking about there. How can we encourage this? Well, we can encourage engagement by asking, what is one thing you like to do as a family outside the home? Where do you feel most connected to others? And so as practitioners, we can provide information on community centers, different after-school activities, and mentoring programs in your communities through flyers on your website. Sometimes we can literally, connect them on your website to the United Way. Sometimes there's a Boys and Girls Club, or maybe there's a rec department, so on and so forth. And so that way we can create ways for youth to be involved in community service projects. So for example, a youth soccer team could do a diaper drive for local organizations where they would serve the community and learn about organizations and other people in the community. So again, as we've been doing each of these building blocks, I'm going to look at the chat. Would love for you to come off mute, put in the chat, what are some ways that you're creating a sense of mattering, either through instruction as you're helping parents understand their role, as in the community, as you're educating teachers and youth serving organizations, or perhaps youth. How are you helping promote it with youth, that engagement piece? Yes, positive dope hits of achieving a goal or task. Isn't that the truth? So we can think of littles, even, 1 through 5-year-olds can make an important support in the home, helping you with chores and things of that nature, or it could be school aged. Any ideas that we want to put in the chat there? Parent leaders, creating systems change, volunteer opportunities, book sorting, parent cafe, leadership, and more. Love to hear all of that, Allison. You're absolutely right. And, we can lean into some of these volunteer opportunities where we're all facing some of these critical funding challenges. How can we reassemble different resources to help bring in the concrete needs that we have for our families? So this idea that it had on the slide about doing getting with the youth sports or adult civic groups and encourage them to do a diaper drive, formula drive, whatever it is that your agency might need. We've adopted the after school youth development standards for youth and after school programs. Love that. Sharing stories and tips that uplift each other. Love it. Love it. Great ideas. Great ideas. And I know that too, like many times we have board of directors, we might have a parent advisory group. And what we want to do is make sure that we have something that gives them purpose where they can feel connected. So wonderful examples. And let's go on to the fourth building block now. And this one is emotional growth. Developing social and emotional intelligence. Children need to have a lot of opportunities to develop their sense of self-awareness and social cognition. They have to learn how to self-regulate their emotions and behavior and acquire skills needed to respond functionally and productively to challenges. Many of these skills arise during child-centered play. So creating that space for children to practice. Some children will pick up these skills naturally, but others may need adults to help them name and understand their own feelings. So either way, these skills are critical for children to be able to become resilient, emotionally healthy adults. And so what do we mean by opportunities for social and emotional growth? So one, developing a sense of emotional and behavioral self-regulation, identifying, that feeling that a person is having and what is the appropriate way to act on that feeling. Another is having the ability to respond to challenges in a productive way. And then a third is developing key social and culturally appropriate communication and interpersonal skills. A lot of big words there to talk about the social emotional competence that we need to develop in children, so that way it can lead to healthy outcomes in adulthood. So let's talk about that in practice. One is you can find out more about someone's emotional growth by asking about, what feelings do you talk about at home? Who can you talk to about your feelings with? And then how can you take care of yourself when you have big feelings? I loved seeing in the chat earlier when we were talking about positive experiences where someone was, I think, getting ready to go on a walk while listening to today's webinar, right? And so learning how we can take care of ourselves. But role playing is in different scenarios is another great way for children to get comfortable sharing their experiences and to prepare for new experiences. We're trying to develop problem solvers, right? Life is all about solving different challenges that are put in front of us. And so brainstorming with our children and talking about some of those what if scenarios, or talking about what happened that day from their own experiences, or maybe sharing some experiences that happened during your work day, right? Or a challenge that you might be having with one of your friends and the feelings that go with it. So promoting empathy in the same way you encourage other positive habits, such as healthy eating, exercising, and studying. So we want to make it a habit to discuss and reflect on the feelings of others, along with how things make you feel. Try to normalize this in our day-to-day. So again, I'm going to hand it back to all of you experts in the room here today. How might you be helping to promote this building block of emotional growth? Those of you that are doing home visiting, I know it's baked in to those home visits, right? It's part of those building blocks of that curriculum. But what are some other ways that you might be doing it at your places? Let's see here, we've got Pamela always taking and working with children and families where they are in an authentic way. Ooh, I love that, because when we show up as our authentic selves and we create a safe space for them to show up as their authentic selves, right? That can make a huge, huge difference and help them feel valued. Some other ideas around how we can help build and create space for emotional growth with the way we serve and help. Leslie, we've got it, resources in the schools and trauma-informed trainings, not just for child-facing professionals, but also the children. Love to hear that. That is great. Modeling co-regulation by remaining settled when the families we are working with are upset, helping work through the crisis. Oh, so true, right? In this self-regulation, the self-regulatory approach, this is something that is, this modeling of this is so important when we're trying to teach our children as well, right? We have to be able to do that first. And so being able to do that in that professional environment, all great examples. Keep throwing them in there, y'all. And if you have any fun resources or links to put in there, we'd love to hear them. So let's now talk about this case scenario. And we're going to slow down. Remember, we were talking about type 1 and type 2 thinking. We're going to practice our type 2 thinking. So if you've got the example on the screen here, but I'm going to go ahead and read the scenario to you, okay? Charlie grew up in a household where mom and dad had violent arguments on a regular basis, which sometimes turned physical. Charlie found it hard to concentrate during school lessons and was often not on task and falling behind academically. I love it that Charlie is a she. She had some friends at school, but found it difficult to regulate her emotions when there was pure conflict and disagreements. So as an adult, Charlie is in a relationship that is often verbally violent and communicates through this relationship through insults and swearing at each other. So let that sink in for just a moment, because we're going to ask you, what building blocks have been disrupted for Charlie? So just kind of want to put that out in the group. Thanks, Leslie. But yeah, if you want to put in the chat, what would be some building blocks that were disrupted for Charlie? And then, of course, we can also lean into how we can improve things. How could you increase Charlie's access to building blocks? So let's feel free to put in the chat, come off mute. Her foundational building blocks. I like that, Ashley. Yes. So she may not have had, when we think back, I'm going to go back a slide to emotional growth. We are just talking about that building block. Perhaps it was not modeled for her how to go through a specific challenge. And sometimes this might be as simple as when perhaps her caregivers, lost their keys, right? It could have been for minor things. Maybe not putting things away when she was a child. And so that adult caregiver was loud and, verbally abusive to her. So you're absolutely right. That relationship, so the relationship building block, I love both of those, Linda. Thank you. Emotional in that. And relationships again, Ashley, that communication. So again, all great examples that you're sharing here. So it's important to note that while HOPE supports promoting access to the 4 building blocks, it is the community and family you are working with that gets to decide what goes into each bucket, right? What types of relationships to them feel safe and supportive? How does this particular family define a safe environment? What kinds of opportunities for social and civic engagement feel meaningful to that child? And how does the family's culture support emotional growth? And so I just packed in a lot of little nuggets there. Many of you are involved in our standards training for the Georgia Family Support Network. We talk about, when we're working with that family, when we're asking these questions, that we're allowing them to be the expert in their own lives, right? And so this talks about this, they get to choose which relationships feel safe and supportive. They get to help identify where they feel safe. And then, of course, where they feel like they might want to engage socially or civically, that could fill their cups up. Then, of course, how do we promote their family's culture to help them with that emotional growth? And so HOPE provides the building blocks, but we can't prescribe what goes into each one. That's going to be unique for each person. And of course, even as we look at these different communities. So it's important to, before attempting to promote access to each of these building blocks, to understand how that unique community defines them. We're going to go on to our next slide here. And let's talk about the intersection between strengthening families and those protective factors, right? Many of you, and feel free to put it in the chat or use an emoji to react, but how many of you have heard of strengthening families, or you've heard of the words protective factors used? So good. I'm seeing some thumbs up there, Angelina, some heart emojis. All of that is perfect. Yes. And so if you've heard of the protective factors, you might be wondering about the overlap between them and the hope building blocks, right? Lot of connection there. Well, the Strengthening Families framework is complementary to hope, healthy outcomes from positive experiences. And it looks at ways to build positive childhood experiences through those 5 specific protective factors. Just like protective factors mitigate, help buffer the bad, so do positive childhood experiences. And so through these 5 protective factors, we can look to build positive childhood experiences. And so the 5 protective factors focus more on how family serving providers can strengthen families at that individual level. Many of us use the protective factors survey to understand where that family's at with those risk factors and the strengths. And so you can think of protective factors as additional tools in your toolbox to help you construct the hope building blocks. And so they're really just connected together, and those 5 protective factors are complementary to hope. And so how can we continue to integrate hope into the existing work that's already happening? And so moments of hope can occur, and it can be layered into the work that you're already doing. And so what does that look like? So one, you can see the first block there in each encounter, right? Start each encounter with a family or a child with a moment of hope, kind of like what we did at the beginning of today's workshop. What has gone well since the last time you saw each other? What is something that they're proud of? And celebrate the success with them, however big or small. We can do this as we serve families. We can do this as we interact with the public, and we can do this as we interact with our team members. Another way that we can help promote this is during intakes and assessments. Each of us has a unique mixture of strengths and challenges. Create a moment of hope by asking about strengths first. Consider asking open-ended questions about relationships, environments, engagement, and emotional growth. And please see the training videos that demonstrate hope-informed screening and for a description of 4 ways to assess for PCEs. And don't forget, we'll make sure those are included in the this recording and the resource tools available to you. When sharing referrals or community resources, we want to ensure that each connection you make for a family is individualized to specific strengths, challenges, and their culture. So offer a moment of hope to families by connecting referrals and community resources to the building block that it relates to. So infusing information about the protective nature of positive childhood experiences into conversations about community resources reminds parents of the tremendous power they have to protect their children's adult health. And so again, as you're talking about community resources, where does that fit in within those 4 building blocks? Number 4, when creating or revising policies, does your policy promote access to one of the 4 building blocks? Does it block access? Does it intentionally recognize the positive? And are there certain groups of individuals who are disproportionately affected by your policy? take a look at our hope-informed checklist for decision-making and hope as an anti-racist framework in action to see how your everyday policies can promote equitable access to the 4 building blocks. And then number 5, in your internal organizational culture, spreading hope goes beyond what happens with families and children. It starts with an internal culture of hope. We love at our weekly staff meetings, we kick it off with what has something positive that's happened to you or within your program that you want to share this week. What has uplifted you? So whether it's big or small, moments of hope can occur every day. And we know they help us stay grounded and positive, and we hope that they do the same for you. Thanks, Joe, for putting in the chat the resources. So we've kind of been doing the building blocks activity along the way. And I want to make sure I've got to go here because there are some great tools here as well. And of course, I did not. Let me get Control C. This is a great one as an organization, a tool that you can use. It's the Strengthening Families Assessment Lists, and it lists many ways that you can use protective factors and building blocks to support families. So this is for organizational use. Now, when working with caregivers, this next tool I'm going to share with you is really for parents. Let me put this in the chat. This one is wonderful as a parent. Here are some ideas to help build a child's emotional growth. And so the last one I gave to you is definitely something that you could easily print and be family facing. That one has language that's very family friendly, that's a little bit more accessible to use. And Jill's got it pulled up on the screen there. So some of the things that we've talked about here, when you talk about, embedding this into the work that you're already doing, this framework is not something that you have to do in addition to. It's just a new lens to do your work through to help promote these positive childhood experiences. So again, we encourage you to look at your intake assessments, look at how you do program enrollment, how you answer the phone, right? All of these things can help you promote positive childhood experiences and the 4 building blocks activities. They'll probably, MJ, more than likely, what we do is we put all of this on our website and we can share the link to that website of where they're going to be found. Typically, they're there within 48 hours. All of our webinars on demand are there for you, and then we'll include the resources as well. And then, of course, today we'll have the recording. So thank you. Great question. Great question.
And I already have the slides up. I just put them up with the citations at the end, but Jennifer's right. We'll put the rest of them up there within a day or two.
And so here we are. We've got, go on to the next slide for us. And so the building blocks help us recognize that people's behaviors and responses to stress are based on factors that may be out of their control. And so when we see unwanted behaviors in children and adults, it's really an opportunity to shift our language and adapt our approach. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with you?" we ask, "What's happened to you?" Or we could even ask, "What's not happening for you?" Consider they're missing out on positive experiences. And so I love this. Hope is not a manualized evidence-based practice. It's a framework. It's grounded in the principles of strength-based, child-centered, and family-led care that seeks to promote access to key positive experiences within the 4 building blocks. And this framework can be integrated into existing models and layered into the work you're already doing. So at its core, we believe that families and children are resilient, and we seek to take every possible opportunity to help promote that. And let's go ahead and see. I think we've got some other ways that we can help promote this for you. One, When thinking of linking families to resources, we always want to remind our prevention partners out there about Find Help Georgia, and how this is an incredible tool that you can link your families to the supports that they need. And of course, as recommended, you want to kind of help highlight which building block this may help them with. And then going on, different ways that you can continue your learning, right? You can learn more about hope and share the framework with your colleagues to go deeper. You can visit there on the website. You can see positiveexperience.org for more information. This Hope Resource Center has lots and lots of briefs and ways to talk about this into different contexts. So the Hope framework can be used in a lot of different ways. Some other ways to help build those connections, right, that we're saying are those positive childhood experiences. And that's all around the Connections Matters workshop to learn more about how positive experiences can buffer the impacts of trauma and adverse experiences. And we're going to put in the chat box, I think Jill's already putting them there for us, but really you can continue to commit to enhancing your building block skills by participating in some of the activities you discussed in the activities that we did. We shared a bunch in here. So what does that look like? And so we'll come off. I don't think there's another slide besides just a thank you. But if anything, we'll take a moment and just answer any questions that you all might have about what you've heard here today around the Hope framework.
I'm sorry, I just put a jumbled mess in the chat, so I'm gonna do it again individually to see if it copies paste better. Go ahead, if you have any questions, put them in, but the evaluation link, if you don't mind filling that out, we have a separate certificate link if you need that. This will automatically send you a certificate to your inbox. There we go. And then the last thing I'm going to put where you can find all of the resources and recording after the fact on our website. I'm going to put that link in there too. And then I'll cool it on the links.
And we'll let y'all fill out some of those forms, but we're here to answer any questions that you may have.